Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Middleware Technologies. Today we'll be looking at how we can generate Python code documentation using Sphinx. Okay, so this article or this video is a continuation to our last video wherein we have seen the basics of how you can install Sphinx and generate documentation out of restructured text files. So the RST text files are kind of markup language text files which we have used and converted them into HTML using Sphinx. So in this video we are going to take it a step forward and try to generate documentation out of Python source code and generate HTML documents out of that. Okay, so let us proceed with this video. So I'm currently working on Fedora 37 workstation with Python 3.11 installed. Okay, so let us go into our step 1, that is cloning a repository. So here in this video I'm going to use a sample project of mine from which we are going to generate the Python documentation. Okay, so let me clone this repository. So I'm going to clone it in a folder named University Portal 2. Okay, so let us go into that folder. So I have already completed the documentation for this project. So let me just remove the docs folder from this. So we are going to see how we can prepare this docs folder and try to generate the documentation out of this project. Okay, so let me remove this. Okay, so as I said, this is a sample project that I am using from my GitHub repo, and this is based on Flask application. Okay, so as a first step we have cloned the repository. Now let us go into our next step. So here before installing Sphinx, let us try to create a virtual environment, that is a Python virtual environment for this project. So let us go into our shell and create this Python -m -v. So this is the module which will help us in generating the virtual environment for this project, and this is the folder in which we are going to use to activate the virtual environment. Okay, so our .vnv folder is created. So if you can, so you can look at the .vnv hidden folder which gets created when we run this command for creating the virtual environment. Okay, now that we have our virtual environment folder ready, let us activate that using the following command. So in vnv folder we will need to run the activate utility in order to activate our virtual environment. Okay, now you can see like our virtual environment is activated. So let us go into our documentation. So here we have created a virtual environment, we have activated the virtual environment, and now we will install Sphinx in this virtual environment. Okay, so now you can see we have installed our Sphinx. Let us look at the version that is installed using Sphinx build. So right now I have 7.0.1 Sphinx installed on my virtual machine, virtual environment. Okay, now let us go into our next step, that is creating the Sphinx document structure. So in order to generate the documentation, let us try to first create a structure for the documentation that we want to generate. Okay, that we want to create. So for that we are going to use the Sphinx quick start tool, which will help us in preparing the structure for our documentation. So let us run this Sphinx quick start using with the docs option. argument. So this is going to create that structure in the docs folder. Okay, so here we need to provide some information that whether we want to separate our source and build directories. So we will separate, so let us answer it as yes. And what is the project name? So let us name it as university portal 2, same as the folder name. And the author name, novice java 1, project release 0.1, and project language, let us it be English, EN. Okay, so now like we have created our documentation structure in the docs folder. So let us explore that one. Okay, so if you do ls-ltr, the docs folder is created, and now let us see the tree view of our project. So if you see the tree view, this is our the cloned application file. This docs folder is the one that got created with the Sphinx documentation structure command that we have executed right now, that is Sphinx quick start. Okay, and other than that, all the other files, license, static folder and templates are all from the cloned repository. Okay, so let me clear my screen now. Let us go into our documentation. So here, like we have completed the Sphinx documentation structure creation. Okay, and we have seen the tree structure of our project also. Now let us go into our next step, that is step 4, generating the HTML documentation. So now that we have our docs folder ready, let us try to generate the documentation out of the default docs folder. Okay, so let us for that we need to go into the docs folder, and here like you will see there is a make file already available. Okay, so this is basically helping us in generating the documentation with using the make tool. Okay, so that is the whole purpose of this make file. So let us leverage that make file and try to generate HTML using the make utility by running this command. Okay, now you can see like our project documentation has been generated. Like you can see a couple of steps wherein it has converted the RST files into the HTML documents. Okay, and you can see the HTML pages are in the build HTML folder. So if you look at the tree view of the docs, okay, so if you look at the tree view of the docs, you'll see there is a build folder that got created, and under the build folder we have the HTML documents under the HTML folder. So here like you can see all the HTML folders are created. So this static folder it contains the CSS file and static JavaScript files which got generated due to some default theme that we the documentation use that we will be looking at in the next steps. Okay, so let me clear my screen. So we have generated the HTML documentation using the default structure that got created in this step. Let us continue. In our next step, that is step 5, we are going to create the update the index.rst file. Okay, so let us go into our docs HTML docs build HTML folder, and here you will see there is a index.html file that got created. Okay, okay, sorry, so we need to go into source here in the docs folder, which will contain our RST files. Okay, so let us open the index.rst file. So this is the default index.rst file that gets created for your project. So let us update it with some changes. So I'm going to copy this and delete this one and update my index.rst file. So basically what I have done over here is I have updated the heading and I have inserted some bullet points over here. So that is all I have did. Okay, so here you can see this is my updated title of the documentation, that is University of Stack documentation. And here, like if you see, we have used star. So this is basically to emphasize on that particular word. Okay, so similarly, like we have used that emphasis on this paragraph also. So this is basically a paragraph, this is basically a heading, and this is these are some of our features which we have kept in the form of bullet points. Okay, so let us update this one. Okay, so let me go into the docs folder again and try to generate the HTML. Okay, now if we launch our build HTML index.rst HTML file, you will see like we have updated our heading, that is University of Stack documentation, and you can see the stack is like highlighted, emphasized, and we have also updated our paragraph over here, and we have kept our features as a bullet point. Okay, so this is how like we can update our index.rst file with some of the directives and the Sphinx language with some of the directives related to the Sphinx, and update our documentation. Okay, so let me go into our documentation. Let me go into my documentation again. Okay, now that we have seen like how we can update our index.rst file, let us try to update our theme for the documentation. Okay, so in this step 6, like we are going to install this theme, pip install Furo. So let me go into my project repo, and let us try to install the theme. Okay, now we have installed our theme. The next step that we are going to do is, before updating the theme, let us try to create a so let us update our theme in the config.py file. Okay, so for that we need to go into our docs folder. So docs folder, in the source folder, like we will be having the conf.py file. So here, like if you look at the HTML theme, it uses the Alabaster default theme, which we need to change and update it with Furo that we have just installed. Okay, now like if you go to docs folder and generate the HTML documentation again and launch our index.rst file, index.html file, like you will see like our documentation is updated with the new theme. Okay, so this is how it looks. Okay, so let me go into my shell, let me clear my screen and go to my documentation again, and now let us try to create our installation.rst file. So this one is basically an addition child document that we are going to create. Okay, so in source folder we are going to create this installation.rst file, and let us update our installation.rst file, that is with the following instructions. Okay, so here also like I'm going to use this heading, and here are the steps that we are going to create using the numbered format, the number format, and this is the directory that we are going to use to put our code in a particular format. Okay, so this is basically our code which will be highlighted in a different code block format using this directive. Okay, so there are a couple of formatting languages that we can use, but right now like I'm using only the console format, so this is the option that we are going to pass to this directive. Okay, so here like I have mentioned 3 steps, that is cloning the repository, running the application using the Flask, and validating the application using Firefox. So these are very basic steps that you can just update in this installation.rst file. Now that we have our installation.rst file created, we will need to include that installation.rst file in our home page, that is index.rst file. So index.rst file is our home page. From there we will need to navigate or launch our installation.rst file. So for that, let us go into our documentation. Let us go into our index.rst file, and here like you see like there is a toc tree directory already present. Okay, so in that like we will just go and append our installation .rst file by mentioning the file name without extension. Okay, so let us save this file, and now if you go into docs folder and generate the HTML and launch your index.html, you will see like your table of content is updated with this installation link, which navigates to the installation.html file that got generated from the installation.rst file. So you can see the code block is highlighted or formatted as per the code block directory that we have used in the installation.rst file. Okay, so this is how like we can generate the code out of the rst files, okay, by including them in the toc tree directive. Okay, now let us go further in our steps. So we have completed updating the rst file and included the installation.rst file. Now it is an important step that we are going to see, wherein we are going to generate the documentation out of the Python source code. Okay, so here like we already have the app.py file. Okay, so let me open that app.py file. Okay, so if you see like I have updated all the functions with this docstring. So docstring is basically a kind of comment which will help us in generating the documentation for our function. So whenever this docstring is included and this module or this file is loaded into the Python environment, we can like use the help or help attribute utility in order to understand about our definition or the function file. So whenever we are going to import this module and run help with that module, like it will provide us with all the documentation for this project. Basically it will provide information about all the definition files for which a docstring is present. Okay, so I have already updated the docstring for all the definitions. So as you can see, so with this a docstring comment, which is basically including a 3 quotation, opening and closing quotations, and in between them like the document that we want to use. Okay, So this is how like we need to update our Python source code. So in case if you are using a different project, like you can you can also update your source code with whatever definitions you have. So it's not only the definition that functions that you can update, but you can update the module level doc strings also. But for this video, like we are just updating the definition file doc strings. So let me proceed into my next step, that is like here like we are going to basically create another file, that is api.rst file. In this we are basically going to generate the documentation out of Python source code. Okay, so let me create that api.rst file, docs source. So I'm going to create that api.rst file in docs source folder, and let us copy this API documentation. Let me save this, and you can see like I have used the title, and here is our list in the number format, and you can see like we have used a different directive now, that is auto function. So this directive basically is going to import the Python like module, that is app module, and it is going to get the doc string out of this index, and it is going to update in the documentation page. So we have updated it for all the functions. So I have just mentioned the respective the definition name in the module, and called this auto function directive. Okay, so right now like we have got our RST file created, we have updated our Python source code, and now let one last step is basically updating the config file. So let me just open the config file first, that is available in source config.py file. So here the first thing that we need to update is we need to update our config.py file in such a way that it is able to identify our source code. Okay, so what I'm doing over here is I am taking the current directory, and from that we are going to navigate 2 folders upward and take the path of that folder. So if you look at print working directory and go so our config file is there in docs source. Okay, so if you go 2 folders upward from here, the current directory wherein the config file is present, so we will get to a point where is the folder is university portal 2. Okay, so if we are there, like we will be able to load our app.py module file. So that is how we need to update our config file. Okay, once that is updated, we need to update our extensions part over here with the extension that we want to use. So you can see like we are using this autodoc extension which provides that auto function directive which is basically used to like load the Python module and generate the documentation out of the doc strings from that Python source code. Okay, so let me save this file, and now as a last step, like what we want to do is we have created the api.rst file, but we haven't included that api.rst file yet in our welcome page. Okay, so let us do that here. So let me open the index.rst file and update our API file name over here. Now we are all set to generate our documentation out of Python source code. So let me run. So first we need to go into the source folder, and now let us run HTML, make HTML. So this is going to okay. So basically I have missed one thing, that is we need to install the Flask requirement also in our runtime. Okay, so that is in our virtual environment. So let me clear my screen. And let me install Flask over here. Okay, now we have our Flask installed, and now let us try to go into our docs and try to generate the HTML documentation. So now we are good, that error is gone. And now let us try to launch our index.rst file, index.html file. Okay, so now you can see like our index.rst file is updated. The first thing that we have updated is with the installation step. For that we have created the installation.rst file, and the next thing that we have done is we have created an API documentation file. From there, like we have included the Python source code documentation in our api.rst documentation. Okay, so you can see for every function it has loaded the doc string out of the Python source code. Okay, so this is how like you can use the Python source code with the updated doc strings and generate the HTML documentation out of your Python source code. Okay, so let me go into my documentation again, and we have seen like we have updated our installation and our API file in our index.rst file, and we have rebuilt our HTML documentation and looked at our updated Python project portal. Okay, now like from this step it is basically like deploying our documentation online so that other users can use it. So here what we need to do is, so whatever project that you have created, okay, whatever project you have created, so whatever project we have created, we can just commit this project changes into the repository, that is GitHub repository. So let me open my GitHub repository. So this is my repository. Over here let me go into my university portal that I have already it's already available for me. Okay, so here like we need to create one additional file, that is requirements.rst file in the docs folder, because we have installed like Flask, Furo manually, but you can update your requirements, like basically the PIP packages that are required for your project in this docs requirement.rst file and create it. Okay, so once we have this one, like you can go into actions, click on create new workflow. So here like you can use the set up the workflow yourself, because we are not going to use these templates. So you can create on this one, and here like you can create your workflow file. Sorry, let me leave this page and try to create this again, and you can just update your file name as Sphinx, like whatever file name you want to give for your workflow, and you can just okay. So let me just give you a brief on these steps before we go into that workflow. So as I said, like you can commit your changes and push that into your repository, and you can also create your requirements.txt file, which contains your requirements, that is installing the Furo and the Flask requirements, and then you can go ahead and create the workflow for your project by going into the projects actions, and there you can create the new workflow as I have shown you. And here like you can just update your workflow with the following content. Okay, so I'm not going to create this again because I already have it, but let me just explain you. So when this workflow gets created, when it is pushed into your repository, so what it is going to do is it is going to build your HTML documentation using the following steps. Okay, so it is going to first create a container using the image Ubuntu latest, and from that it is going to use this following action and check out your source code, and next it is going to build the HTML. Okay, so it uses the action, Sphinx action, and then once the documentation is built, the HTML documentation is built, it is going to upload that artifacts into your repository. Okay, so with this following name HTML docs, and it is going to take the input from docs build HTML, and once we have the artifacts ready, it is going to deploy that artifacts from the branch gh pages. Okay, so what we are doing over here is we are basically taking the documentation out of the main branch. Okay, and we are copying it into the gh pages folder, that is basically deploying into that updating that branch with the documentation content. Okay, so once that is done, okay, so you can just save this one. Once that is done, let me leave this because I'm not going to save this one. So let me leave this and go into the settings. So in this settings, like you can go into actions, general, and you need to provide a read-write permissions for your workflow. So you just make sure like you are updating your workflow permissions as shown below. And the next thing that you need to do is go into the pages, and here like build and deploy section, like you need to update this source deploy from a branch and select the branch as gh pages. Okay, so it is basically going to take the documentation out of gh pages branch, and it is going to deploy as GitHub pages, and this is the portal wherein you will be able to see your updated documentation. Okay, so once you have all these changes done, like you can just go and check for the workflows. Like you will see, like you will have a workflow that is getting triggered, and you can just check, like it basically builds and deploys your documentation. So this is the workflow related to the GitHub pages, and this is the workflow that gets triggered when you create the Sphinx.yaml file. Okay, so if you go into details, so it basically does all the steps that we have mentioned in the Sphinx.yaml file. So it basically checks out the repositories, builds the HTML, and it uploads the artifacts and deploys the documentation artifacts from the GH pages branch, and this is how it completes our workflow. Okay, so if you go into the settings again and go into the pages, like you will see like your site link is also available, which you can just click on it and visit it. So you will have your documentation ready for your project. Okay, so this is how like you can generate the documentation out of Python source code for your project using Sphinx. Okay, so these are the steps like I have already shown you, like set up the GitHub pages, and like once the GitHub pages is set up, like basically you need to update your permissions and update your GitHub pages section, and once that is done, you can just wait for your workflow to be completed successfully, and then you can just validate your GitHub pages for your project. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Thank you all, thanks for watching this video, and you guys have a great day.